New York Yankees catcher Thurman Munson was killed today in the crash of a small airplane at the Akron-Canton Airport in Ohio. Reports were 2 other people were in the small plane with him. The plane belonged to Munson. He had bought it recently and was learning to fly. The air controller said it had been making practice takeoffs and landings when it crashed about 1,000 feet from the runway. Thurman Munson, dead at the age of 32.
During much of the season this year, he hasn't caught for the Yankees since last week, being played instead at first base and in the outfield. In fact, just the other day, Munson said he wanted to end his career in the outfield, that he was finished as a catcher. Earlier today, Munson was doing what he loved almost as much as baseball. He was flying his plane. He was practicing takeoffs and landings when the small Cessna Citation crashed just 1,000 feet short of the runway. One person trying to get close to the burning wreckage was overcome by the fumes. And even though Thurman Munson played ball for New York, he was loved in Ohio, his home state.
Munson was from the city of Canton, and he graduated from Kent State University. In the off-season, he still lived in Canton and was shown here last winter being roasted by area celebrities. His private jet crashed just as it was taking off from Akron-Canton Airport, hitting a road just south of the airfield. 2 other people were on the plane, and one of them was killed also. The rumor is that he was probably in Akron to check on whether or not he could repair some of the damage in his knee area. And he was apparently attempting to take off for play, resuming with the Yankees, when his plane apparently went down just off the runway out of Akron-Canton Airport.
And since that report was filed, we have learned that only Munson was killed in that crash. His 2 passengers were taken to the hospital, both listed in fair condition tonight. Art has been watching Munson and the Yankees for years now. He's here with a look back at Thurman Munson's playing career. Jerry?
It was incredible how Thurman Munson won the love of the fans and the other Yankees. Here was a guy who didn't talk much, was moody, and who mostly kept to himself. So what was the secret? Well, you see, the message came through with the way he played. Tough, especially when the chips were down. The guy you wanted up there when the game was on the line. The players watched him play with pain and won their respect. The fans saw him hustle for that extra base. They loved it. So Thurman didn't have to say a word. It was all there between the white lines. Lifetime 300 hitter, 100 RBIs 3 years in a row, most valuable player in 1976. And yet this was not a completely happy man. There were a lot of reasons, and the biggest was separation from family. He missed his wife and kids in Ohio. He told Steinbrenner he wanted to be traded. It didn't happen. Steinbrenner said, "Don't worry, Thurman is too much a competitor. He won't lay down." And he was right. Munson was a killer down the stretch. The Yankees got into the World Series, and no one was happier than number 15 when he had the pleasure to squeeze the ball for the final out to clinch the series. And in the locker room later, you saw the pride of the Yankees come through, so the whole nation could see.
Well, the only thing that I want to know, and I want to find out next year, if we get in the series, I want to know if we're going to be underdogs again. Underdogs? This year, yeah. You know, we won 3 games in New York. We were under game when the series started. We came back here and we were underdogs. I just
That's right. And it was
kind of like the favorite one. Thurman came.
When told of Munson's death, Billy Martin cried. He couldn't talk. George, competitors I've ever known. Later on in Action News, I'll be back with Frank Messer and Bill White in a special tribute to Thurman Munson. Steve?
Munson lived in Norwood, New Jersey before selling his house a year and a half ago and moving his family to Canton, Ohio. I talked to 2 of his teammates and neighbors in Norwood tonight. Greg Nettles says Munson just got his new plane.
Well, he was enthusiastic. He was like a kid with a new toy, and he really enjoyed the flying. And like I say, he did it so that he could commute between here and Canton, so he could get home and be with his family as much as possible. And you know, it's just something that you know, I flew with him a couple weeks ago in that same plane, and you know, he was so happy about it and so enthusiastic. And it's just, you know, I mean, I was in a state of shock when I heard about it. I still can't believe it.
Thurman Munson was a private man who shunned reporters and gave few interviews. Catfish Hunter says he did that because he didn't want the public to know him and like him simply because of his personality.
You know, he wanted to like him for what he did, not just his name, being a ball player. And I think that's the reason that he didn't want to talk to sports figures and everything in TV or newspapers. He wanted to just, if he did something good, let him put it in the paper. he did something wrong, then put it in the paper. But just for him to beat his gums, do something about, he didn't want that, you know. He's just, he didn't want any praise or anything. He just wanted what was due to him, that was all.
Catfish says Thurman was his best friend on the Yankees and one of the best-liked players on the team.
I guess you can always do without somebody, but he'll always be remembered by all the Yankee players here today and the old ones that knew him too.
Even those of us who didn't know Thurman Munson personally feel a sense of loss. Bill?
Thurman Munson.
All right, Bill, I think the key word with Thurman Munson is consistent. Munson was one of the most consistent ball players in the history of baseball. He rarely gave you a bad ball game. Excellent defensive catcher, accurate arm, had a fast release. Was also one of the best clutch hitters in baseball, besides being a defensive player. Especially with men on base, he was an excellent hitter. Among other things, Munson is the first Yankee really to win the first Rookie of the Year and MVP. All-American catcher, Kent State, hit .529, remember that, in the 1976 World Series, and hit over 300 in 5 of his full 9 years as a Yankee. Number 15, Thurman Munson. Ironically, Munson just received his pilot's license and purchased the plane so he could fly from New York to Canton, because it's only 1 hour, so he could do so even on a Yankee homestand.
Good evening, everyone. Just last year, Thurman Munson wrote, "I have a new love, airplanes." Tonight, the Yankee catcher and team captain is dead, killed this afternoon in the crash of his new twin-engine jet in his Midwest homeland of Ohio. Munson was practicing touch-and-go landings and takeoffs when the graceful jet slammed into the ground and burst into flames 1,000 yards short of the runway at the Akron-Canton Airport. 2 others on board, one of them a flight instructor, survived the fiery crash. They are hospitalized for burns tonight. We have 2 stories now, Jerry Knackman with the fans and the baseball commissioner. But first, our Jim Boughton with a look back. Jim?
Thank you, Carol. Thurman Munson was an All-American catcher at Kent State University. He was the Yankees' #1 draft pick in 1968. After spending only 99 days in the minor leagues, Munson was called up to the Yankees. In 1970, he became the first Yankee ever to win the Rookie of the Year and Most Valuable Player award. In 1971, Munson tied a Yankee record, making only 1 error all season. Munson then won the Gold Glove Award in 1973, 74, and 75 as the league's best fielding catcher. In 1976, Munson set a World Series record, highest average playing on a losing team, .529. Munson was one of the most consistent hitters in baseball, batting over 300 in 5 of his 9 seasons with the Yankees. Perhaps he was most famous for his competitiveness. Last year, for example, Munson was hit on the head by a pitched ball, struck in the throat by a foul ball, had sore knees all season long, and yet still managed to play 154 games. Munson simply could not sit on the bench while the Yankees were making their great comeback. He even had to be there to catch the last out of the game. Thurman Munson was also very popular among his teammates, which is one of the reasons why he was chosen team captain, the first Yankee captain since Lou Gehrig, who also died prematurely. People on the Yankees were, understandably, too stricken to appear on camera. Owner George Steinbrenner said this, "I've lost a dear friend. He was a great family man. He was our leader." When Steinbrenner told Billy Martin of Munson's death, the Yankee manager cried like a baby for hours. Jerry?
Jim, there was no Yankee game scheduled today, and that seemed merciful, since a contest on the day of Thurman Munson's death probably would have been impossible. But the Mets were playing, although few people tonight in the park had baseball on their minds.
We ask that you please rise and join in a moment of silence in memory of New York Yankee team captain Thurman Munson.
It rained off and on tonight at Shea Stadium, but there would have been a cloud over the field anyway once fans and players learned the Yankee captain had died. Naturally, Thurman Munson didn't work behind the Shea Stadium home plate, but he was a New York player, and the sorrow felt here tonight was very real. The sorrow stretched from the very top man in baseball.
The loss of Thurman is really an incredible loss for us. Prime of his career, exciting ball player, very good ball player, a wonderful family man.
through another player who could be called a top superstar. Baseball lost a good man today.
Well, you know, sympathies go to Thurman Munson family and the New York Yankees. You're absolutely right. Not only the Yankees and Thurman's family lose a tremendous asset, but baseball in general lost a tremendous asset. And he was always one of my favorite people when we played the All-Star games.
To a Met pitcher who says today he threw his best when Thurman Munson was calling the signals.
It took control of me at one time when I was with the Yankees, and I just left my entire game up to him. He was take charge catching.
And most of all, the loss touched fans who missed a home team player, even if he starred in a different stadium in a different borough.
One of the best, you know, from New York, and we love him, you know, like anybody else from the Mets, you know. It was a shock.
I think they ought to waive the rules and let him into the Hall of Fame right away.
That's right. Same thing like Clemente. Just like Clemente.
He deserves it.
Yeah, he deserves it. He was one of the best, you know.
Anybody from New York, New York is different than, you know, like New York is, we feel it so much that it's like part of the family.
Now, is the situation tonight at Shea like a bunch of grieving relatives? From the commissioner and other major league players emerged a complicated picture of Thurman Munson, an extraordinarily good-hitting catcher, a personal man who resented normal, expectable press inquiries, but a war man who saved his emotions for his teammates and his family. Dave.
A safety investigator says Thurman Munson of the New York Yankees probably could not get out of his crashed airplane because he struck his head inside the plane when it hit the ground. 2 others in the plane got out alive. Today, the Yankees sent out their baseball shirts to have black armbands sewed on the sleeves and went ahead with tonight's game with Baltimore. Here's Gerald Harrington.
The first game of the big series with Baltimore at Yankee Stadium was not canceled, but the major league flags that fly over the stadium were lowered to pay respect to the Yankee captain and catcher, Thurman Munson. Even before Munson's plane missed the runway at the Akron-Canton airport, they had expected a sellout crowd for the Baltimore series. The next 4 games could make or break the Yankees' pennant hopes for this year, but that doesn't seem so important now.
Well, I know we're going to miss him. It's going to hurt us, and you know, it's tough to talk about right now. You know, it just happened so fast.
All around the stadium, preparations for the night game continued. Team shirts that had been sent out overnight to have black armbands sewn on arrived. At the bar across the street from the stadium, one fan wore his own version of the armband to mourn Munson's death.
Maybe someday his picture will be up there. Should have played a few more years. Maybe he could have made the Hall of Fame. Now I don't know whether he'd make it on sympathy or just on his merit alone.
At the souvenir shop next door, Bruce Oran was taking inventory of his Munson buttons and posters. He had ordered some extras. Late this afternoon, somber Yankee players began to arrive at the stadium. The only one who would stop to talk was outfielder Lou Piniella.
He was compassionate. He was a good human being. He was liked a lot by the kids out here at the ballpark. Liked a lot by the community he lived in Canton, and he's just about completely the opposite from what you get the impression of if you don't know.
In the shadow of Yankee Stadium this afternoon, 2 neighborhood sandlot teams remembered Thurman Munson their way by keeping alive the game Thurman Munson loved so well. Gerald Harrington, NBC News, New York.